Welcome back. In Iraq, 4 protesters and 2 police officers have been killed as anti-government unrest resumed after a lull of several weeks. 3 protesters were killed in Baghdad after security forces used tear gas and live ammunition. A 4th demonstrator was shot dead by police in Karbala, while policemen were killed during clashes in the oil city of Basra. Elsewhere in the country, hundreds of protesters burned tires and blocked main roads in several cities, including Nasiriyah, Karbala and Amara. They say Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi has not fulfilled promises, including naming a new government acceptable to Iraqis. More than 450 people have been killed since protests against corruption and unemployment broke out in October last year. Iran has threatened to quit the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty if it is accused of violating the 2015 nuclear deal at the UN. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said Tehran has been abiding by the JCPOA despite violations by its Western and European signatories. The threat comes a week after Germany, the UK and France said they will activate a trigger mechanism when Iran reduced its JCPOA commitments. Addressing the Iranian parliament, Zarif said European claims about Iran violating the 2015 deal are unfounded. Earlier, Iran's foreign minister warned of a final and more effective step if other parties do not fulfill their obligations. In a media brief, Foreign Ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi said, despite Western violations, Iran is remaining in the deal. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and French President Emmanuel Macron have restated their commitment to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. This comes after Johnson called for the deal to be scrapped and replaced with a new one. The leaders of both countries agreed to a long-term framework during their meeting on the sidelines of the Berlin Libya Summit. A Downing Street spokesperson said they agreed on the importance of de-escalating and finding a diplomatic way through the current tensions. The leaders' statement follows the deal's European signatories triggering a diplomatic dispute mechanism last week. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has described Europe's signatories as no longer trustworthy. In Syria, airstrikes by Russian warplanes killed 6 people and wound 17 others in Aleppo and Idlib. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says children and women were among the victims. Russia backed Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, whose forces have been fighting rebels in Idlib since 2015. Last week, Russia and Turkey brokered a ceasefire deal to end the fighting in Idlib, but it could not take hold. In Germany, world leaders have endorsed a UN arms embargo on Libya at the Berlin Summit. The different sides agreed to end the role of foreign powers in the country's war as part of a wider plan to end the conflict. This report has the details.
With over 100,000 people killed and 1 million displaced, the world has finally turned its attention to the conflict in Libya. Rival camps and their foreign backers met in Berlin for a summit to find a way to end the long-running war. Gathered together by Germany, presidents of Russia, Turkey and France, among others, signed a plan to stop interference in Tripoli's affairs.
We have to make sure that all the parties involved in the Libya conflict speak with one voice. And that was the goal of today's conference. Because then also the parties inside Libya will understand that there is only one non-military way to a solution. And we have achieved this goal.
Libya's UN-recognized Prime Minister, Fayez al-Sarraj, and the commander of the Eastern Forces, Khalifa Haftar, also appeared at the gathering. However, they refused to meet each other, but did agree to set up a military commission, a step towards a lasting ceasefire. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, stressed a widespread support for the ceasefire.
We need to have a ceasefire. We have a truce. And one central question is that all the participants today committed to support the ceasefire and committed to put pressure on the parties to the conflict for a full ceasefire to be reached.
Speaking at the conference, the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he hoped Libya's major oil fields will now be reopened. Khalifa Haftar's military closed eastern Libya's oil ports before the Berlin summit.
More on the Middle East. In Yemen, the death toll from a missile and drone attack on a military training camp in Marib has risen to 116. Saturday's strike follows months of relative calm in the conflict between the rebels and Yemen's internationally recognized government. The attack has been blamed on Houthi rebels, but they have not claimed responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry has condemned the attack it believed was carried out by the Houthis. In a statement, the foreign ministry said the assault reflects Houthis' disregard for peace. The Palestinian Liberation Organization says the U.S. is trying to turn the future Palestinian state into Israeli-controlled cantons. The PLO Executive Committee member Hanan Ashrawi said Washington is an accomplice to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory. She said America's repeated peace plan announcements are a ploy to prevent the two-state solution. She said Washington backs Israel's unilateral steps, such as the persecution of Palestinian refugees, border disputes, and settlement activity. Ashrawi said all these violate international law and binding UN resolutions. In Indian-occupied Kashmir, Indian forces have martyred 3 more civilians in Shopian district. Witnesses say occupying forces used heavy weaponry and explosives during a cordon and search operation in the Waki Letta area. Kashmiri media said the Indian troops' operation started earlier this morning. The occupation forces have martyred 10 Kashmiris during the current month so far. The occupied valley is reeling under the crushing curfew and communications blackout by India for the past 169 days. Prime Minister Imran Khan will attend the 50th World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland from the 21st to 23rd of January 2020. He is set to hold bilateral meetings with several world leaders, including US President Donald Trump, on the sidelines of the forum. The thematic focus of this session is on stakeholders for a cohesive and sustainable world. World and business leaders will deliberate on contemporary economic, geopolitical, social, and environmental issues. Prime Minister Imran Khan will make a keynote address at the WEF special session and interact with CEOs and corporate leaders at the Pakistan Strategy Dialogue. He will also highlight the current situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir and Pakistan's perspective on key regional and international issues. Meanwhile, in India, 70,000 people have come out on the streets against the controversial Citizenship Act in eastern state of Jharkhand. The organizers say protesters included 30,000 women in Jharkhand's capital, Ranchi. Talking to the media, the organizers said this was the state's biggest protest against the new act. The protesters said the government will have to withdraw the citizenship law because it is against the principle of one religion, one humanity. Meanwhile, hundreds held a rally from Jama Masjid to Shaheen Bagh in the Indian capital. The protesters paraded a mock detention camp during the march while chanting slogans of independence. In a related development, Sumatra Khan, a leading member of India's ruling party, has called people and celebrities opposed to the controversial Citizenship Act dogs. Indian activists, students, politicians, and even actors have been protesting across the country against the anti-Muslim law for over a month. In a rally, the Bharatiya Janata Party leader said people who oppose the law are dogs of West Bengal's Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. Another BJP leader, Keshav Prasad Maurya, has called protesters opposing the act mentally affected. The ruling party leader said such people need medical treatment. 27 people have died in nationwide protests since the act was passed in December. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. In Bangladesh, a court has sentenced 10 members of the banned militant group Harkatul-e-Jihad al-Islami to death. They have been convicted for the 2001 bombings in the capital Dhaka that killed 8 people and wounded over 50 others. During the verdict, 4 of 13 accused were present in the court, while 6 were tried in absentia. In its final decision, the Dhaka Metropolitan Sessions Special Tribunal acquitted 2 of the accused. The plot ringleader and Harkatul Jihad al-Islami chief Mufti Abdul Hannan was hanged in 2017 for his involvement in a separate grenade attack. China's President Xi Jinping says the country would curb the spread of an outbreak of pneumonia caused by a new coronavirus. State media quoted the president as saying that people's lives and health should be given top priority. Total known infections now exceed 200 and 3 people have died. The sharp uptick in causes comes as millions of Chinese prepare to travel for the Lunar New Year holidays. Health officials have identified the infection, which first appeared in Wuhan in December. Although the outbreak is believed to have originated at a marketplace, scientists are yet to determine exactly how it has been spreading. Exiled ex-Bolivian President Evo Morales has named his party's candidate in the upcoming elections for president and vice president. Speaking at a conference in Argentina, Morales said the former economy minister Luis Arce Catacora will run for president. Morales named the ex-foreign minister David Cherqui Honca as Catacora's running mate in the May 3rd election. Morales announced the candidates after a meeting with senior MAS party officials in the Argentine capital, Buenos Aires. In a recent opinion poll, 20% of voters chose a MAS candidate. 15% went for the interim president, Janine Áñez, as their preferred winner. In the U.S., 4 people have died and 20 others have been wounded in 2 different shootings in the states of Texas and Missouri. Police say 2 people were killed and 15 wounded in a shooting outside a Kansas City bar. They believe the shooter is one of the dead. Officials in San Antonio, Texas, said 2 people died and another 5 were hurt by a shooting in a club. Police say 1 victim died at the scene and another was pronounced dead later. Police are still searching for the suspect. In the U.S., 2 police officers have been shot dead in Honolulu on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. Authorities say the incident happened in a residential district near Diamond Head, a popular tourist destination. The man who fatally shot the officers then barricaded himself inside a house after setting it on fire. Officials believe he has now died. Police said they closed the street in Diamond Head near Waikiki Beach and are investigating now. 3 men have been stabbed to death in Ilford, East London. Police say all 3 victims were pronounced dead at the scene. The authorities say no arrests have yet been made while they are still formally identifying the victims. They say the case could be a triple murder investigation. London Mayor Sadiq Khan condemned the killings, expressing his grief for the families and local community. The local media say knife crime has risen by 80% in the UK over the last 5 years. That includes 40,000 cases in the last 12 months. Seven people have died on the Indonesian island of Sumatra when a footbridge packed with people snapped. The police say some of the victims fell into the overflowing the river below and drowned, while 3 more are still missing and feared dead. Rescue officials say 30 people, mostly students, had just returned from a tour and stopped on the bridge to take photos. Officials said 20 survivors have been rescued, many with minor injuries. They said the river level below the bridge was higher than usual after torrential rains pounded the region. Three people are killed after a fire erupted in pipeline owned by Nigeria's state oil company in the commercial capital Lagos. Residents say the fire also burned nearby houses and vehicles. Many fires on pipelines in Nigeria are caused by theft and sabotage. The Director General of State Emergency Management Agency said his team found that some undesirable elements vandalized the pipeline. Officials say the state oil company is assessing the situation. In China, 3 people have been injured, including 1 in critical condition, after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake jolted Jiaxi County in northwest Xinjiang. The earthquake left over 17,000 households in the county without power and stopped 9 passenger trains. Officials say some houses collapsed, but relief work is underway. China's earthquake monitor said the quake struck at a depth of 16 kilometers. China says it has a plan to phase out single-use plastics across the country by 2025. The country's National Development and Reform Commission says it will reduce plastic pollution across China by 2025. The new policy says non-degradable bags will be banned in major cities by the end of 2020 and in all cities and towns by 2022. The restaurant industry will also be stopped from using single-use straws by the end of this year. China produces more than 29% of the world's single-use plastic. The government says it will promote the use of degradable products instead. In Germany, shopkeepers and industry groups are outraged by a new law that requires every business outlet to print a receipt for each transaction. The scheme began this month to help put an end to tax evasion. With many small sales each day, generating piles of unwanted tickets has become a problem for many. More in this report.
Obligatory receipts were voted through in Germany in 2016, but the law flew under the public radar until shortly before it came into force on January the 1st.
We cannot simply accept that the state watches billions of euros in the taxes get lost.
Now, every business is obliged to print a receipt for every transaction. Each shop must print hundreds of receipts a day, even if the customer doesn't want one.
In Germany, cash registers in small shops have electronic chips that can be read at any time. The tax office also has access to them. Why go back to the old system now and start printing again?
Many think the idea is bad for the environment.
I don't think instead we should be looking after companies like Amazon and making sure they pay taxes in Germany. And besides, it's a huge waste of paper.
People say it's not the small businesses that are trying to avoid taxes.
I don't think instead we should be looking after companies like Amazon and making sure they pay taxes in Germany. And besides, it's a huge waste of paper.
By October, retailers are legally required to install tamper-proof cash registers. To calm the outrage, authorities point to Austria, Italy, Portugal, and other European countries, which happily live with obligatory receipts.
A recent study has found 1% of the world's richest population holds twice as much wealth as the bottom 90%. In a report, the global charity Oxfam says the gap between the rich and the rest of humanity has reached grotesque proportions. The new report, Time to Care, shows the world's top 20 richest men now have more wealth than all the women in Africa. The report says there are only 2,153 billionaires in the world, but their wealth matches that of 4.5 billion people. The report said India's richest 1% hold more than 4 times the wealth of the bottom 70% of the country's people. In Nigeria, an engineer has created a water power generator, hoping his invention will promote the use of clean energy. This could be a game changer for the country, where about 80 million people aren't connected to the national power grid. More in this report.
Umeka Ugwezi got the idea to build a gasoline-free generator after losing a friend in an accident. He began building the model in 2001 and has been improving it ever since.
I actually lost a friend to a generator, which actually brought about this, because I wanted to do something that kind of eliminate the use of gasoline generators in the society. So I'm actually an advocate of clean energy and waste management.
His latest device is powered by high-voltage motorcycle batteries with no emissions. Friends, family, and even strangers have helped him fund his experiments. He's also invented other machines to help solve environmental problems.
This is the C12A model of the Mbonwe series machine. What this one actually does is that it transforms trashes, your plastic, nylon, waterproof, and then the rest into petroleum products like petrol, kerosene, diesel. and some other heavy oil.
Uguese's neighbour has been using his water power generator for a year. She uses it for lighting, running a fan and watching television.
He's very, very excellent. I'm even begging him to, sell for me, but he said that is not possible now. I'm even waiting for any time that he has produced it on going to the market. That is must. I must even purchase like 5 for myself and my family.
Should the generator be successful, it could be a boost for Nigeria. The country has suffered decades of chronic blackouts, and 80 million of its citizens have no access to power.
We're taking a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Breakdancing was born on the streets of the United States around the 1970s. Since then, the modern art form has become a global phenomenon. Now, the International Olympic Committee is considering declaring it a sport. More in this report.
Antonio Castillo fell in love with breakdancing as a child in Mexico in the 1980s. He now runs a studio in Washington, teaching teenagers the finer points of the style. Many of his students hope to win Olympic gold one day.
You break for a long time, really just to enjoy it, because there hadn't really been something that at that level before. And then once you get that, you kind of have something to work towards, and it's a really big inspiration because you feel like you could be an Olympian.
Young performers say once breakdancing becomes an Olympic sport, it will be taken seriously enough for them to turn their hobby into a career.
I've always been like, oh, can this be what I do forever? And now it kind of can because of the Olympics and all that. So it's a lot to process, and it's super exciting.
Castillo has also helped the Olympic Committee create a scoring and rule framework for competitive breakdancing. A final decision is expected in December.
In the US, the 26 Screen Actors Guild Awards have been presented in Los Angeles. The night's big winners are not so different from the 2020 Golden Globe Awards. More in this report.
Male actor in a comedy series.
In the star-studded awards night, the casts of Bombshell, Marriage Story, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood led the film nominees. But it was the Korean film Parasite that won the top prize, becoming the first foreign language film to pick up the award. In the lead actor category, Joaquin Phoenix won for Joker, while Renee Zellweger won Best Actress for Judy. The Friends star Jennifer Aniston picked up the Best Actress in a Drama Series for The Morning Show.
The times that I've been invited, and to be up here is truly an honor. Thank you. Oh, Adam Sandler, your performance is extraordinary and your magic is real, buddy. I love you.
Brad Pitt and Laura Dern each took gongs for supporting roles in their movies Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Marriage Story. Phoebe Waller-Bridge won Best Female Actor in a Comedy for Fleabag, capping a year of multiple awards for her and the show.
This whole thing really has been a dream, and if I wake up tomorrow and discover it was just that, then thank you. It's been the most beautiful dream.
Robert De Niro walked away with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his work on screen and humanitarian accomplishments.
Storms have brought heavy rain to the fire-hit regions of eastern Australia, but authorities say the bushfire crisis is still far from over. More severe storms have also been forecast for the fire-ravaged states in the next few days. More than 80 blazes still burn across New South Wales and Victoria State despite the downpours. Melbourne and Canberra have been hit by heavy hailstorms, with hail as big as golf balls witnessed in some areas. In the meantime, a huge dust storm has swept across towns in the central west of New South Wales. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.